Okay, now it should work. Thank you very, very much, Helmut, for this very flattering introduction. I would like to just tell people a little bit from my background. I have a small laboratory for global villages. I am a sociologist and philosopher, futurist and technophiliac, a networker and connector, but I refused to do an academic career because I thought it is very, very important to be aware of what's happening in the world and to be flexible and to be comprehensive. So this is why I founded this organization, which is a tiny organization, and it is ambitious. It wants to grow into a global villages network. We had some conferences in Vienna, and of course, now this is a rather virtual connection, but I would like to explain what it is at the end of this speech. But first of all, let me say, I must now a little bit change the tone, because it seems difficult to talk about the future when everything that we were certain of is shifting. Within a few days, the world seems to have derailed. We already thought the Corona crisis was rocking our value system. Now, again, fundamental assumptions on which our world so far was built are shattered. War has returned to the European sphere. Our belief in a global network of material flows is confronted with a shortage of fossils and many other raw materials. Our cozy trust in global markets that serve our needs is deeply compromised, and we suddenly feel the urge of rethinking and reconceptualizing all of that. Could it be that this is simply the second wake-up call after Corona, that we must consider resilience, proximity, circularity, and above all, self-reliance as the basic design principle on which we must reshape or even rebuild our world? Is the fact that we are losing trust in our future as it used to be the moment when we are actively forced to mold it in a more conscious manner? I would like very much to have us all perceive this and also understand that what we are facing is much more than a glitch of a Kremlin madman's horrible decision. It is the obvious breaking down of the systems and spider webs of command and control spanning around the globe, of power competition and projection, of spheres of influence and domination and extraction that used to create global cities, trade routes, and the most unbalanced distribution of wealth in all the world's history. And the small tech, high-tech weaponry that annihilates conventional tanks and airplanes could be like a positive symbol of this shift. Although the war was never won, and the empires are weaker than ever, let us for one moment imagine that we would draw the conclusions from all this and created a truly peaceful and equitable world, applying all the power of technology and knowledge that we have in the 21st century to strengthen non-violence resistance everywhere. Oops, sorry. My goal is to show that a redefinition of countryside, of the rural and natural, is at the core of such a transformation. And just listening to Ines' speech and looking at it, it was really, really expressing this. Without the web of life maintaining their existence, humans are nothing. But without humans investing their energy and creativity in cultivating and support this web of life, without humans, nature would not be as much as it could be. It is humans who overwhelmingly jeopardize the future of species and ecosystems, but it is also humans who are engaged in trying to secure this future, and they are beautifying and they are increasing the abundance of ecosystems. And this is where we stand. We need to basically accept that our relation to nature has to shift. We need to go beyond the concept of exploitation on one side and conservation of nature on the other side. Researchers are calling for a fourth nature concept, returning to the original embeddedness of humans within nature, but not as an opposition to civilization, but rather as its highest development. Fourth nature means the acceptance that we are essentially part of nature. Not only human health and well-being is depending on it, but also our social existence, our identity and recognition are intertwined with the biosphere. Now let me just, for getting back to reality, add this little joke. Wolf Rüdiger Marunde is a cartoonist, and I would like to put a piece of his perception of the current countryside here. A couple in a rural garden home surrounded by agricultural fields have a dialogue. She says, "Oh, darling, how beautiful it is. May has come." And he says, "Yes, dear. Let's make a spring trip to the city, darling. Everything is blossoming there. In the parks, there are trees and a lot of birds. Imagine their twittering." So you all see what I want to say, that rural areas have a large potential, but the failure of industrial agriculture has fundamental consequences for our concept of economy and culture. There is a recent documentation, The Need to Grow, that shows not only the destruction, but also the crucial potential of human ingenuity in soil restoration. What nature needs to do with the soil in 400 years, a human-built arrangement can do in a week. So humans can dramatically improve and support the biosphere, and as much as rewilding and renaturing can be part of this improvement and support, they can never become the overarching concept of our relation to nature. I think this is the main message, the first main message. We need more human entanglement than retreat from nature. And also we need to redefine our metrics of wealth. We need to do away with the abstract concept of growth measured in money and numbers. Human well-being is increasingly decoupled from GDP. So what is the third concept beyond self-imposed frugality on one side and hyperconsumption? I think we are increasingly discovering this very concept is regenerativity or symbiosis. The late founder of the New Work movement, Fridtjof Bergmann, has tried to formulate catchphrases for this transition. Although he was dealing with urban circumstances in Detroit and so on in his life as a practical philosopher, he coined the phrase, "We all must become farmers again. Wir müssen alle wieder Bauern werden." I think this catchphrase is a good motto for our future of interdependence. It does not only mean that the connection to soil and the nature is important for our identity, it also means that we must sow before we can reap. We need to invest ourselves as a species in the foundational energies that, once set into motion, bring forth abundant fruit. And here on this screen, you see that we are going through a funnel, the so-called sustainability funnel. Ever-growing demands are meeting ever-shrinking resources. And sustainability is like the point zero, but sustainability just does not mean means doing no harm, but it does not solve the problem. We need to reduce demands and increase resources. That's the human purpose, and it's almost self-evident that this call is the opposite of the call for a continuation of our current industrial agriculture system. And vertical farming and lab meat post-agriculture might be part of the picture, but they themselves might be built on exhaustive schemes of nutrition extraction and waste dissipation. And there are still many people that deny that we will have a rural future at all. But as we saw yesterday in this wonderful speech by Helmut Klüter, their voices are increasingly drowned out by the mass exoduses that we all have already seen during the pandemic. Urban density stress seems to have reached a tipping point, and it is producing a rebound effect. And most likely, the vulnerability of urban systems through the breakdown of global supply chains to be expected in our immediate future will increase this rebound effect dramatically. So I tried to find an image for that. And I said, the termite mound is no longer the desirable model for our lives, but could it be the mother tree? And the mother tree, as you all know, is a fictional habitat from the film Avatar. And I think this concept is a perfect meme for the regenerative alternative that we're looking for. I told you I want to make a grand view of our rural future. And definitely the alternative that we're looking for is not to disband everything into small farms and eco-villages. The alternative is to combine the best features of urban and rural. The leaves of the mother tree turn their sunlight into biomass. The roots of the mother tree connect to the metabolism of the soil, yet they are structurally connected. If we take this metaphor literally, it teaches us about the potential shape of our post-industrial habitat. We do not just plant trees, our settlements should be built according to the tree or plant paradigm. Rather than isolating ourselves in a chimney tube like the termites, we might see increased proximity of human and natural habitat as the design imperative of the future. And I put here this small image of the 500-year city by Gene Selmer. He has designed a linear city of urban hills that are connected like fingers of a hand, and they maximize the green surface for every single inhabitant of this beyond city village environment. Now, am I talking still a little bit apart from reality? I don't think so. The United Nations Social Report 2021 on reconsidering the countryside has called for a concept called Insitu Urbanization or Insitu Urbanization, which calls for entirely new patterns of human settlement. Urban and rural shall not be separated anymore by enormous distances, but urban functions need to be decentralized and feed into a new and diverse rurality. So the design of rural areas is one of proximity, where small urban nodes and pockets are embedded in cultured landscape. And the United Nations, they also point to some existing examples. For example, the desa kota, which is the word for city and village in Indonesia. And I also added Landstadt that we had at the last Rural Design Days in Austria. So in situ urbanization is neither the classical urbanization, which means the expansion and densification of population in pre-existing cities, nor is it greenfield urbanization, where previously rural areas are converted into urban areas through a sharp increase in their population size. By contrast, in situ urbanization is actually a model of rural development in which the essential rural characteristics, landscape, cultured landscape, villages, and so on, persist, while the standard of living rises to that of the urban level. How can we imagine that? Well, besides these examples that I quote here, you might say, okay, they have done it since a long time, or the Vorarlberg is so cozily condensed. I think there is a potential to do that everywhere. And a good approach to understand the complexity of this development is to conceptualize a pattern language for rural design and identify the interacting elements that create positive vitalizing feedback loops. This is what Alexander calls a pattern. Patterns are pieces in reality which all the time they enhance in each other. They start to play, they start to feed into each other. They give energy to each other. Alexander had already groundbreaking assumptions about the importance of the equal distributions of cities and villages. You can read that in the point, the distribution of towns. He was very much concerned about balance between big cities and small villages. And he also has very, very interesting ideas about countryside as a multi-use and multi-purpose space with public access, free public access, guided by certain rules that allow for different groups and purposes to enjoy the land. This last sentence, with such a setup, a farm near a city might have picnickers in its field, even during the summer. Well, you find that possibly in Austria or in Norway, but not very often around the globe. But Alexander was not putting attention to reality. He said, I want to look at reality that works. And then he shifted his attention, unfortunately, more to cities. In his book, A Pattern Language, maybe he was unaware of the enormous destruction rural settlements would face during industrial agriculture. So a pattern language of the 21st century rurality still has to be written. While when we don't have a finished pattern language, we nevertheless can draw from Alexander's most ontological principles of aliveness and vitality that he laid out in The Nature of Order, is that strong centers of interaction will be mandatory, which means places that foster encounter and exchange between people. The enigma of Insitu Urbanisation, which might be the holy grail for rural design in the 21st century, set up by the United Nations, might be easily solved if we consider urbanity as interaction, vibrant and full of surprises, and not necessarily a sea of buildings. Urbanity is people, is interaction, and is not a big city. And so we need to put our attention on already existing opportunities like railway stations, market halls, village centers, to turn them into pockets of urbanity. Recently, a group from Salzburg Institute of Spatial Planning, SER, undertook the first steps into developing a pattern language for rural areas by pointing at new emerging centers of activity symbolized by this alpine ski lift station in Zell am See, the Schmitten. And I think this is a strong image because it shows as well the destructive side of tourism, as well as the potential of these patterns for creating a strong center. So the assumption here is that we will find hundreds of such valid patterns, and I would like to show you just a handful of them, which are my favorites. The first one, I don't need to talk very much because it is very well known in Silicon Field style, is the multifunctional village center, a place where different activities of the local community are permanently entangled. As in the example before, a combination with mobility fosters interaction. So good places for such vitality centers are either placed in the center of villages or at the nodes of transport, be it a bus station or a train station. A very interesting point is that mobility might also mean virtual mobility, which things like that that we do here, or even more public viewings, can also work the other way around. Urban institutions can literally move to a village. A university lecture or opera viewing can be enacted in a local multi-purpose hall as we experiment with our Dorf Uni, Village University, and Dorf Kino, Village Cinema projects. This ties into the next pattern, not an architectural one, but rather a sociological one. We need to, this is at the very right side, we need to connect learning with regional development and do it in all ages, from the elementary schools on. Several communities in Austria have created school campuses that start to connect people with their regional possibilities from their early age. In the Forchdorf case that I show here with Grandpa Holinetz, the father, grandfather of Martin Holinetz, he is educating a young boy about how to design a Christmas with LED, a shining little Christmas tree. It was the coming together of a visionary regional developer who promoted common activity spaces, guiding by all the users, by the users all around Upper Austria. This is the Otello idea, Open Technology Lab, with the strategic vision of a municipality that thrives on a regional cluster of metal and electronic-based firms. So this was like a natural match. Let's create a kind of creative build-up from the very beginning that is in tune with the development goals of the region. Here we can also see the great power of self-organized upskilling and of the dialogue of generations. The next pattern that I think holds valid, although already on a larger scale, is the theme village. That's, for example, the fishing village of Oponitz at the left lower side. Turning the circumstance that many villages are relatively small and remote into a point of attraction, identity, and pride, it undoubtedly started in tourism. So from a need to generate an alternative source of income and foster a community feeling and pride in declining rural areas, resulted the idea to become a special place with special features and competences. And although the idea was developed in Austria, I must say, Poland is the country that has developed this in an explosion of theme villages to the largest extent. Maybe also because out of the need to balance the lack of tradition in the war-torn areas of West Pomerian Voivodeship, where we witnessed the infancy of this movement in 2003. But today, the whole country of Poland boasts an amazing number of theme villages. But there is a way further, and this is what I would like to point to with this central picture of complementing villages. In Austria, there is the region of Leinsitztal in Waldviertel, where 3 municipalities decided to complement each other with their themes. One to be focused on health and tourism and culinary activities and all this. Another one to be focused on building and energy and the material base of life. And the third village, St. Martin in Leinsitztal, would be the center for social innovation, technological innovation. And this is not anymore primarily for tourists, but also for the local population. The division of labor comes with plans for a stronger integration of the municipalities to a small region. Again, this echoes what Helmut Klüter said yesterday. Fostered by a fiber optic connection and local transport system, again, the pattern of mobility is important, that intensifies visits and commutes. And of course, this makes them grow together. And if you see this idea of Mitfahrbank in the Stanz in Mürztal, they already have electronic displays. So nobody who drives a car can, without bad conscience, anymore refuse to take the person on the bench with him. It's like almost a social habit that they introduce, and which makes reduces the the number of cars and which enables people without cars to rely on a dense network of help. So there is a huge potential for other spatial patterns that correspond with the already mentioned ones, not only spatial ones, but I think my time is also beginning to run out, although I was generously granted this time. So I want to make a first stop with a comment on Helmut Klüter's Garden of Metropolis speech yesterday. I made a screenshot and I said, yes, with each proposition, I can totally agree. But there is one incredibly important thing to add. Then this thing is, the more we shift to the local and discover the immense potential of circular economies, the more we discover the potential of global intellectual cooperation and inspiration. The reason is, when we shift towards the circular economy, we do not primarily compete on external markets anymore, which makes it easier to support each other in their growth towards the inside. So this is the reason why I think our future villages might be also be aptly called global villages. So before maybe I say 3 minutes more, I would like to see if there are already some questions.
Can I ask a question?
Great. Yeah, sure, Robert. Go ahead,
Thanks.
please.
How much do you think these developments will be driven by the municipality or the community, the official community, the governance and so on? And how much do you think that individual businesses, such as I would like to establish, to be honest, can be spearheading this sort of development, such as you showed in the one of the previous slides?
I'm very glad that you put this question. I think we cannot afford anymore to leave everything to the administration. I think we have to develop a kind of co-responsibility for our regional development. And I think this is very much in line with what Pioneers of Change and the Schweißfurt Stiftung are just starting right now. They start a project called 100 Participatory Regions, 100 Mitmachregionen, all over Germany and Austria and Switzerland. So we try to train public administrations and municipalities to perceive the citizens as a resource and not as an obstacle. But for this, there needs to be a lot of qualification and education also on the side of the people who have left so far the common good to the administrations. This is a process that does not work from one day to the other, but it must be started and initiated right now.
Thank you.
Thanks from our side for that brilliant question, because we from Silicon Valley also deeply believe that social initiatives can really make a difference, in particular in rural regions, and maybe the future is in co-innovation between the municipalities and the non-state actors in such regions. We also see more and more openness in governmental administrations for shared approaches between state actors and actors from the non-state side. Today we have with us Alessandro Rancati from the European Commission, from the European Bauhaus team. And this is a nice example for how state organization can encourage initiatives from all fields to drive important topics forward.
I give you an example. The Bureau for Self-Organization in the state government of Vorarlberg is actually going into municipalities to encourage citizens. So to add to Helmut's remark, it is even a responsibility of government, of high-level government, to make the citizen, the civil society active. And without that, we will not manage the challenges of the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. So as we are otherwise would run out of time, we go forward to our next speaker, but the next speaker will be introduced by Alessandro Rancati, who joined us, willing to moderate the afternoon from the New European Bauhaus team of the European Commission, a true friend. And we are happy to have you, Alessandro, and I hand over the event to you.
Before you do that, Helmut, let me just make one last remark. The most iconic image about the potential of rural areas just comes from China, the restoration of the Loess Plateau. So humans have really the potential to create a paradise on this planet everywhere. And this will increase our global connections and will not tear us apart. Thank you very much for this extra time.